So today we're going to be doing section 4.2, which is about soil formation and erosion. The learning objective for today is that you can describe the characteristics and formation of soil, and you're going to be learning what soil is, how it's formed, some of the different layers in soil, and different factors that can impact how it is and what makes it up. So first we're going to start with what is soil. Now, oftentimes this is commonly referred to as dirt. However, that's not technically the scientific word for it. So here in AP Environmental Science, we are going to be calling it soil because that's actually scientifically what it is. So what is soil? It's going to be a mix of geologic, which is rock, and organic, which is living components. So inside soil, you're going to find sand, silt, clay. You're going to find humus, which is going to be the main organic part of the soil. It's broken down biomass like leaves, dead animals, waste, etc. Soil also has nutrients in it, such as ammonium, phosphates, nitrates, and it has a bunch of different types of minerals that are going to be beneficial to the ecosystem. It also has water and air in it, and then living organisms. If you think of plants or things like earthworms, those are going to be in the soil as well. Now, the soil is going to be really important for the entire ecosystem, and I'm going to highlight a few of the different ways that this is the case. So first of all, for plants, soil is going to anchor the roots of plants. It's going to provide water, shelter, and nutrients so that these plants can grow. Things like potassium or magnesium are necessary for plants, so the soil is going to provide that for it so that it can grow and build itself as it needs to. Additionally, soil is going to be beneficial for water, especially if you think about the water cycle. So soil is going to filter rainwater and runoff. It's going to trap pollutants in its little pore spaces, and it's going to, plant roots are also going to take in the water from the soil. And we benefit from this filtration that happens in soil because it's going to clean water that enters groundwater and aquifers that we as people use for our primary source of water. Additionally, soil is going to be really important for nutrient recycling because this is where we're going to have decomposers living, and these decomposers are going to break down dead organic matter and return nutrients to the soil, which is going to be beneficial for cycles such as the nitrogen cycle, where you need that to be cycling and moving. Additionally, soil is going to provide habitat for a lot of organisms like earthworms, fungi, bacteria, moles, slugs. If you think about things that live in soil, it's going to be providing a habitat for them. Now we're going to talk about a couple factors with soil, and the first is going to be weathering. Now weathering is going to be the breakdown of rocks into smaller pieces, and there's a few different ways that weathering can happen. The first is going to be physical. This is where you're going to have things like wind, rain, freezing, thawing of ice is going to slowly break down rocks into smaller pieces. We also have biological, where you have things like the roots of trees are going to go through and they're going to crack rocks apart and break them. And then we also have chemical. Things like acid rain or acids that are released from moss and lichen are going to be part of breaking down rocks into these smaller pieces. Now, weathering of rocks is ultimately going to eventually lead to soil formation because it's going to keep being broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces until it is going to no longer be a rock, but it will actually be small enough to be part of this soil. And when you have this weathering, you then have the second part, which is going to be erosion. And erosion is going to take away these little pieces of rock and is going to deposit them in other places. So erosion is the transport of weathered rock fragments by wind and by rain. And this is going to carry it to a new location and deposit it. So if you look here, imagine that a lot of these little pieces had been weathered down from rocks. Now you're going to have rain come in, it's going to transport it, and this is where we're going to see kind of this new deposition of this weathered rock as it's going to be part of the soil. So when we're looking at soil formation is going to be happening from down below, but also from what's happening on top. So we're going to look at these two different components. Now, if you're looking from below, all soil has part of it where a chunk of it it's called parent material, and that's going to be rock. So if you look at this diagram, this area here is going to be the bedrock, which is going to be the rock portion as you get lower and lower down into this soil. Now, immature soil is going to have a really large bedrock area. And then as you have it kind of breaking down, you're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller fragments from weathering. And then this will start to make up some of the geological or the non-organic part of the soil. So these parts are going to be things like sand, silt, clay, and minerals are going to be coming from that rock that was weathered down. Now from the top is where we are going to get a breakdown of organic matter. So you're going to have things like plants dying or leaves being deposited or organisms dying. And this is going to be adding humus to the soil. And remember that humus is that kind of biological stuff that's been broken down. Additionally, we can also have erosion depositing soil particles from other areas, which will be adding to the soil. So as you have this weathering of the bedrock, as you have some of this stuff being added on top, this is ultimately going to be creating this soil and the different layers that you have as you have time going on. So there are things that can have an effect on soil formation. Now, the first part is going to be the parent material of this type of rock. This is going to impact things like the soil pH or the nutrient content. For example, if that parent material was limestone, that's going to be adding a bunch of calcium, and lime is going to be raising the pH of the soil. And so just based on the type of rock that was there, that's going to have an effect on the breakdown of the soil that's being formed. Additionally, topography is going to impact it. If you have a really, really steep slope, you're going to have too much erosion, and you're going to have more of this eroded material deposited on the ground level. So think of steep mountains, how you're going to have more of that soil being eroded down the mountain, and then you're going to have more of a deposit at the bottom of it on the more level ground. Additionally, climate can impact soil formation. For example, in warmer climates, you're going to have a faster breakdown of organic matter because heat is going to cause more decomposition to occur. Now, if it's an area where there's more precipitation, you're going to see more weathering, more erosion, more deposition. And so you're going to see some of this rock being broken down and more movement of these eroded soil particles, just based on the fact that it rains more or there's more precipitation in that area. Now, additionally, we're going to look at the organisms. They have a big effect on soil formation as well. Soil organisms like bacteria, fungi, worms, they break down organic matter. So if you have more of them in an area, that is going to be impacting the soil that's being formed in that place. So now we're going to look at soil horizons, which is going to be the layers in soil. And there's different layers here. So I'm going to be going from top to bottom. And if you look at this diagram, the letters are going to correspond with what I'm showing you as well. So we start with the very top here, and this is the O horizon. This is going to be a shallow layer of organic matter. So think like plant roots, dead leaves, animal waste that's going to be sitting on top of the soil. This is going to provide nutrients from that decomposing matter, and it's also going to limit the water loss to evaporation. So imagine thinking if you have a bunch of leaves, that's going to be holding some of the water in, and it's going to limit the water that's evaporating out. The next part that we have is the A horizon, which is also called topsoil. This is going to be the layer of humus, which is, remember, the decomposed organic matter. And it is also going to have minerals from the parent material below in this topsoil. The A horizon is going to have the most biological activity. This is where you're going to find a lot of your earthworms, soil microbes, where they're breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients. The next layer is going to be the B horizon, which is also called the subsoil. Now, this is going to be a bit lighter in color because remember that humus is really dark. If you think of broken down, if you've ever ordered compost, it's going to be really dark because it's got that decomposed organic matter. That is basically going to be humus, and it's really dark. So as we're coming away or we're going deeper in this soil horizon, it's going to be lighter because you are not going to have much of that humus in this portion of the soil. So it's mostly going to be made of minerals with little to no organic matter in it. It is going to contain some nutrients, just definitely not as much as the O horizon or the A horizon there. Then we are also going to have the C horizon, which is the lowest one there. This is going to be your least weathered soil that's closest to the parent material. Sometimes this is called bedrock. And if you look here, it's basically, it's mostly bigger rock, and it has not really been broken down much. So now we're going to look at soil degradation. And soil degradation is going to be the loss of the ability of soil to support plant growth. And this is something that humans often are going to be contributing to. And there's going to be a few different ways that we can degrade soil. So the first is going to be a loss of topsoil. If we are constantly tilling it, we're turning soil over for agriculture, and you're going to be losing a lot of that vegetation. This is going to disturb the soil, and it's going to make it more easily eroded by wind and rain. So the loss of topsoil is going to dry out the soil. It's going to remove nutrients, and it's going to remove some of those soil organisms that recycle the nutrients. So you start to get really dried out soil like we're seeing here in this picture. The next way that soil can be degraded is going to be through compaction. And compaction is where you're going to be compressing soil by machines, such as tractors, bulldozers, etc. It can also be compressed by grazing livestock or even humans, like continually walking in a certain area. And it's going to reduce the ability of the soil to hold on to moisture. Because think about the fact that if we are pushing it closer and closer together, it's going to be all scrunched up, and you aren't going to have those pores that can hold water in it. And so it's going to be losing its ability to hold water because there aren't much of those pores left. Now, dry soil is going to erode a lot more easily. Think about the fact that wind can come and pick it up when it is dry. It's also going to support less plant growth. It's going to have less root structure, which is just going to continue leading to more and more erosion because it's not being held in there by the roots of the plants. We also can have nutrient depletion, and this is often going to be happening from agriculture. If you are repeatedly growing crops in the same soil, it's going to be removing key nutrients because those crops are going to be taking up a bunch of the nutrients from the soil over time. And ultimately, this is going to be a problem for the agriculture because eventually it's going to reduce the ability to grow future crops because you're going to hit a point where there's just basically no nutrients left in the soil, and the plants and crops need that nutrient. So when you deplete those, then the soil is going to be degraded, and it's going to be a problem for future farming endeavors. So your practice FRQ for 4.2 is going to be practicing the suggested skill of identifying a research method, design, and or measure used. So I want you to try your best with this one. And what you're going to do is design an investigation to measure the effect that climate has on soil formation. So you'll just give me an explanation of how you would set this up, the different trials that you might have, and how you would be able to test this effect of climate on soil formation. Now, I also want you to identify the independent variable and the dependent variable in your experiment. So that's going to be your practice FRQ for 4.2, and these were your notes on 4.2 about soil formation.